Hi students, welcome to lesson number 19, Scaling Techniques. Introduction. Human beings measure the physical objects using some scales to determine their weight, height or some other features of the object. We also judge people like how well they sing, paint or the attitudes or personalities of the people and so on. Thus, we measure both physical objects as well as abstract concepts. Scales are used to measure people's attitude as well the factors which influence or affect the social phenomenon. For example, factors which affect the student's performance in examinations, performance of salesmen, performance of politicians in national building and so on. In social science research, we quite often face problems measuring concepts which are complex, abstract and absence of standardized measurement tools. In other words, we try to measure people's attitude. It consists of a number of statements or questions to be related to scores. The respondent expresses his agreement or disagreement with a number of statements relevant to the issue. There is no faultless and perfect method of measuring attitudes. The researcher will try to measure the expressed opinion and then draw inferences from it about one's feelings and attitude. In this lesson, we will learn about different types of scales which are used in measuring attitudes of the people. After reading this lesson, you will be able to define the meaning of measurement, define scaling techniques, define different types of scales. Scaling is the procedure of measuring and assigning the objects to the numbers according to their specified rules. In other words, it is the process of locating the measured objects to the continuum. A continuous sequence of numbers to which the objects are assigned is called as scaling. Scaling is considered as the extension of measurement. The measurement is the process of assigning numbers or symbols to the characteristics of the object as per the specified rules. Here, the researcher assigns numbers not to the object but to its characteristics such as perceptions, attitudes, preferences and other relevant traits. In research, the numbers are assigned to the qualitative traits of the object as the quantitative data helps in statistical analysis and further facilitates the communication of measurement rules and results. All the scales can be explained in terms of four basic characteristics. They are description, order, distance and origin. These characteristics collectively define the levels of measurement of scale. The level of measurement indicates that what properties of an object are measured or not measured by the scale. Meaning. Scaling describes the procedures of assigning numbers to various degrees of opinion, attitudes and other concepts. The researcher can make judgment about some characteristics of an individual and place him directly on a scale, or he or she can construct questionnaire and the response of the individuals will assign him a place on the scale. Scaling has been defined as a procedure for the assignment of numbers to a property of the object in order to impact some of the characteristics of numbers to the properties in question. According to Sarantakos, the main reason for using scales are mentioned here. The first one, high coverage. We try to cover all significant aspects of concept. The second one, high precision and reliability. Scales allow a high degree of precision and reliability. The third one is high comparability. Scales permit comparison between sets of data. And fourth one, simplicity. Scales help to simplify the data which is collected and analysis of data can be done. Levels of measurement or types of scales. The scales can be classified into two bases. One is mathematical comparison basis. In this basis, there are four types of scales. They are nominal scale, ordinal scale, interval scale and ratio scale. And on the other basis, there are four types of scale: Bogardus scale, Thurston scale, Likert scale and Gutmann scales. Let us first discuss the scales of mathematical comparison. The first one, nominal scale. The nominal scale simply places people, events, perception and so on into categories based on some common trait. This scale classifies individuals into two or more categories where the members differ with each other with respect to the specific characteristics. For examples, males and females, Hindus, Muslims, Christians and others and so on. The usual example is assigning numbers to cricket players to identify them. Such numbers cannot be considered to be associated with an ordered scale, for their order is of no consequence. The numbers are just convenient labels for the particular class of events and as such have no quantitative value. Nominal scales provide convenient ways of keeping track of people, objects and events. One cannot do much with the numbers involved. All the members of a set should be assigned with same number and no two sets are assigned with the same number. For example, the researcher wants to know the gender of respondents on the nominal scale. The researcher can divide the population into sets or groups. For example, male has been given number 1 and female has been given number 2 and third gender has been given number 3. The population who have males will be given number 1 and for the population who have females will be given number 2 and so on. Here the numbers do not have any meaning. The researcher cannot average the numbers assigned or compare the numbers assigned to one group with the numbers assigned to another. Since the members who are labeled under the set can be counted and compared, the researcher is restricted to use mode as the measure of central tendency. Nominal scale is the least powerful level of measurement. It indicates neither order nor relationship and has no arithmetic origin. In spite of this, nominal scales are still very useful and are widely used in surveys when data are being classified by major subgroups of the population. Now let us discuss about ordinal scale. The ordinal scale places events in order, but there is not an attempt to make the intervals of the scale equal in terms of some rule. The ordinal scale can be used to rank the individuals based on the range of the characteristics. For example, from highest to lowest or from least to greatest, first to last and so on. Rank order represents ordinal scales and is frequently used in research relating to qualitative phenomena. For example, the intercaste and interreligious marriages are on increase in India. The researcher would like to know the perception of the college going students on intercaste and interreligious marriages. All the students who accept this relation can be categorized as number 1 and those who do not accept the relation can be categorized as number 2. Another example, a student's rank in his graduation involves the use of ordinal scale. For example, first division, second division, third division and so on. Thus, ordinal scale provides a rank order of categories and arrange objects according to their magnitude. This will not help us in finding the differences between the sets. The appropriate measure of central tendency is the median. Now let us discuss about interval scale. This scale has equal units of measurement, which enables the researcher to interpret the distance between the two sets. In interval scale, the intervals are adjusted in terms of some rules that has been established as a basis for making the units equal. For example, there are 4 teaching staff who are teaching sociology in Osmania University. A is the lecturer, assistant professor is coded as B, associate professor is coded as C, and D is the professor. A gets the salary of rupees 50,000 per month, B draws a salary of 75,000 per month, C draws the salary of 1 lakh per month, and D gets 1,25,000 per month. Now we can say that the difference in their salaries is rupees 25,000. We can also say that the difference between A and B is equal to the difference between C and D. Interval scales provide more powerful measurement than ordinal scales. It also incorporates the concept of equality of interval. Mean is the appropriate measure of central tendency. Now let us discuss about ratio scale. Ratio scale has an absolute or true zero of measurement. The number of typing mistakes in a letter or a number of crimes and so on represents the scores on ratio scales. The ratio scales have absolute zeros. It will explain the relation of one value to another. For example, 2 individuals A and B are learning typewriting. With ratio scales, we can say that A's typing performance is twice as good as that of B's. The ratio involved does have significance and facilitates a kind of comparison which is not possible in case of an interval scale. Ratio scale represents the actual amounts of variables. Measures of physical dimensions such as weight, height, distance, and so on are examples. Generally, all statistical techniques can be used with ratio scales, and all manipulations that one can carry out with real numbers can also be carried out with ratio scale values. Multiplication and division can be used with this scale, but not with other scales. Measuring scales. In social science research, while measuring attitude of the people, the questionnaire will be prepared in such a way that the score of the individual responses assigns him a place on the scale. While developing statements in the questionnaire, the researcher must note that the statements must elicit responses which are psychologically related to the attitude being measured. That the statements need to be such that they discriminate not merely between extremes of attitude but also among individuals who differ slightly. Researchers must be aware that inferring attitudes from people through questionnaire has several limitations. People may conceal their attitude and express only socially acceptable opinions. People may be unaware of their attitude about an abstract situation until confronted with a real situation. They may be unable to predict their reaction. Therefore, there is no sure method of measuring attitude. The researcher can only measure the expressed options and then draw inferences. The first one, Bogarde's social distance scale. The Bogarde's social distance scale was created by sociologist Amory S. Bogardes as a technique for measuring the willingness of people to participate in social relations with other kinds of people. Bogardes established one of the first departments of sociology in America at University of Southern California in the year 1915. He used the social distance scale for studying associations between Americans and Albanians. For example, like, are you willing to live in the same country as Albanians? Are you willing to live in the same community as Albanians? Are you willing to live in the same neighborhood as Albanians? Are you willing to live next door to an Albanian? And are you willing to let your son or daughter marry an Albanian? There is a logical structure of intensity inherent among the items. Presumably, if a person is willing to accept a certain association, He is willing to accept all those that precede it on the list, those with lesser intensities. Though this is not necessarily the case, as some critics of this scale point out. Each item on the scale is scored to reflect the level of social distance. From 1 as a measure of no social distance, which would apply to the question 5 in the above survey, to 5 measuring maximize social distance in the given scale. Though the level of social distance could be higher on other scales. When the ratings for each response are averaged, a lower score indicates a greater level of acceptance than a higher score. Now let us discuss the advantages. The first, the scale is very easy to create and administer. The Bogadas social distance scale helps in measuring prejudice or underlying thoughts or feelings between two separate distinctive groups of people. The third, the options are arranged in an order ranging from low to high degree of social distance, which helps to establish the preference of each group. Now let us discuss the disadvantages. The first one, the ordering of options may mean different to different individuals in a group. Hence, the validity of the distance in options may not hold true to the respondents. The second one, the distance between two options is subjective. The distance between 1 to 2 and between 5 to 6 is not the same. The third one, as the nature of the scale is unidimensional and data is collected accordingly, we cannot explore the reasons for the responses provided by the individuals. Fourth one, as the scales do not allow to know the reasons for individuals' responses, it will be difficult to check its validity. Now let us discuss about Thurston's scale. The Thurston scale is created by Louis Thurston. This scale is proposed to develop a format for generating groups of indicators of a variable that have an empirical structure among them. For example, if you were studying discrimination, you would create a list of items, maybe 10 for example, and then ask respondents to assign scores of 1 to 10 to each item. In essence, respondents are ranking the items in order of the weakest indicator of discrimination, all the way to the strongest indicator. Thurston's method of equal appearing intervals is most commonly used in the construction of scales. C. A. Moser and G. Catlon has described the procedure for the construction of the scales. The first step involves in collecting a large number of items consisting of statements on the subject of research, that is nothing but the topic of research. The statements which are ambiguous, duplicated, need to be removed from the list. The second one, a large group of judges are asked independently to assess the statements or items. Each judge is given the task to sort the items into a set number of piles. The number of piles is often 11, but mostly 7 and 9 are used. The judges are asked to place the statements which he thinks are most favorable for the study in the first place and the next unfavorable in the second pile, and so on. The judges are asked to make objective evaluations of the positions of the items on the attitude continuum and not to express their own views. The third step, this sorting of items or statements by each judge yields a composite position. In case there is any disagreement between the judges in assigning a position to an item, that item is discarded. Once the respondents have scored the items, the researcher examines the scores assigned to each item by all the respondents to determine which items the respondents agreed upon most. The Thurston method has been widely used for developing differential scales which are utilized to measure attitudes towards varied issues like war, religion, and so on. Now let us discuss the demerits of this scale. The characteristics and attitudes of the people who judge the items in the item pool may vary from those of the respondents whose attitudes are to be scaled. This may affect the values of the scale. The second one, it requires a lot of effort and money. Now let us discuss about Likert scaling or summated scales. Summated scales are frequently used in the measurement of social attitudes. This scale was devised by Likert, which is popularly known as Likert type scale. In summated scales, the answers to questions are given only as agree or disagree. The scale uses only the definite favorable and unfavorable statements. It omits or excludes the intermediate opinions. Summated scales consist of a series of statements and the respondent has to express whether he or she agrees or disagrees with the statement. Each statement is given a numerical score to get the total scores. The scores of different responses are summated or summed up, which are used to measure the attitude of the respondents. In a summated scale, the respondent is asked to respond to each of the statements in terms of several degrees, usually 5 degrees, but at times we may also use 3 to 7 degrees of agreement or disagreement. For example, when we ask the students pursuing master's degree from Osmania University on the effectiveness of national educational policy in India, the respondents may be asked to check the level of agreement as per the statements. First one strongly agree, second one agree, third one undecided, fourth one disagree, and fifth one strongly disagree. We find that these 5 points constitute the scale. At one extreme of the scale, there is a strong agreement with the given statement, and at the other strong disagreement, and between them lies intermediate points. If we see the Likert type scale, we have taken 5 points. The first point is strongly agree. We have given the number 5 or plus 2. And the second point is agree. We have given 4 points or plus 1. The third one is undecided, for which we have given 3 points or 0 points. The fourth one is disagree, for which we have given 2 or minus 1 points. And the fifth one is strongly disagree, for which we have given 1 or minus 2 points. Each point on the scale carries a numerical score. Response indicating the least favorable degree of satisfaction is given that least score, say 1 or minus 2, and the most favorable is given the highest score, say 5 or plus 2. The Likert scaling technique, this assigns a scale value to each of the 5 responses. Think there are 25 statements. The scores of the statements will be 25 into 5, which is equal to 125. Most favorable response which are possible, that is 25 into 3, that is 75, a neutral attitude, and 25 into 1, which is equal to 25, most unfavorable response which is possible. The scores of any individual will fall between 25 and 125. If the score happens to be above 75, then it shows favorable opinion to the given point of view, and if the score happens to be less than 75, then it shows unfavorable opinion, and the score exactly if it is 75, then we would suggest of a neutral attitude. This way, the instrument tries to collect the total score for each respondent, which will help in measuring the attitude of the individuals towards a particular issue or topic which is being studied. Now let us discuss the advantages. The Likert scale has several advantages. The first one is it is relatively easy to construct the Likert type scale. Second one, Likert type scale is considered more reliable because under it respondents answer each statement included in the instrument. Third one, each statement included in the Likert type scale is given an empirical test for discrimination ability and permits the use of statements that are not directly related to the attitude being studied. The fourth one, this scale can easily be used in respondent center and stimulus centered studies. The fifth one, it requires less time to construct. At the same time, this scale also has its own limitations. There are several limitations. The first one, the researcher can examine whether respondents are more or less favorable to a topic, but it is not possible to tell how much more or less they are. The interval between strongly agree and agree may not be equal to the interval between agree and undecided. The second one, the total score of an individual respondent has little clear meaning, since a given total score can be secured by a variety of answer patterns. The third one, there is no objective basis for expressing different degrees of agreement or disagreement. Now let us discuss about Guttman scaling or cumulative scales. This technique is developed by Louis Guttman. Cumulative scales are also known as Louis Guttman's scaleogram analysis. Like other scales, cumulative scales consist of series of statements to which a respondent expresses his agreement or disagreement. Scaleogram analysis helps to determine whether a set of items form a unidimensional scale or not. In the cumulative scales, all the statements or items are ordered by degree of difficulty and are related to one another. The respondent who replies favorable to a difficult of complex items will always respond positively to less difficult items. For example, an individual who gives a favorable answer to item number 5 is expected to give favorable answer to item number 4 to number 1. The individual who gave favorable answer to item number 4 is expected to give favorable answers to item number 3 to number 1 and so on. Thus, all the individuals who respond favorably to the items have higher score than the individuals who react to the items unfavorably. The individual scores will be calculated by counting the points concerning the number of items. These total scores will place the individual on the scale of favorable or unfavorable attitudes. In this technique, the respondents are asked to indicate in respect of each item whether they agree or disagree with it, and if these items form a unidimensional scale. The response pattern will be shown in the table. Response pattern in scaleogram analysis. If you see, we have 4 items and we have also taken the respondent score. If the respondent is going to agree for 0.4, then he is also going to agree for item number 3, 2 and 1. That means we are going to have the respondent score, that is 4. And if the person or the respondent is not going to agree for 0.4, but he is going to agree for item number 3, 2 and 1, then his score will be 3. The respondent may be disagreeing with item number 4 and 3, but he may be agreeing for 2. So, obviously, he will be also agreeing for item number 1. So, his score will be 2. And the respondent may disagree with all the 3 points and he will be agreeing only with point number 1 or item number 1. So, his score will be only 1. A score of 4 means that respondent is in agreement with all the statements, which indicates the most favorable attitude. But a score of 3 would mean that the respondent is not agreeable to item 4, but he agrees with all others. In the same way, one can interpret the other values. Now, let us discuss the advantages of this scale. The first one, this technique assures only a single dimension of attitude being measured. The second one, researchers' subjective judgment is not allowed to creep in the development of scales, since the scale is determined by the replies of the respondents. The third one, scaleogram analysis can appropriately be used for personal, telephone or mail surveys. but this scale also has its own limitations. The first, the main difficulty in using this technique is that in practice, perfect cumulative or unidimensional scales are very rarely found. This method is not frequently used for the simple reason that its development procedure is tedious and complex. Criteria for good measurement. Measurement needs to be precise and clear in a good research study. The researcher must be aware of the sources of error in measurement. First one, respondent. Sometimes the respondents may be reluctant to express strong negative feelings, or he may have very little knowledge, which he or she may not admit his ignorance. This results in an interview of guesses. Factors like fatigue, boredom, anxiety and so on may limit the ability of the respondent to respond accurately and fully. Second one is situation. Situational factors may also influence the measurement of the social phenomena or phenomena being studied. Any situation or condition which places strains on the interviewer or interviewee can have serious effects on the rapport between the interviewer and the interviewee. Measurer. The interviewer in the process of interview may record the question or change the wording. This behavior style may encourage or discourage certain replies from the respondent. The researcher must be careful at the time of coding, tabulation and statistical calculation. Fourth one is instrument. Researcher has to use simple words. Questions should be understood easily. Printing must be adequate or good, and sufficient space should be provided for replies. If there is any error, it may make the measuring instrument defective and may result in measurement errors. Sound measurement must meet the test of validity, reliability and practicability. These are the three essential conditions in evaluating a measuring tool. The first one is validity. Validity refers to the extent to which a test measures what we actually wish to measure. In other words, validity is the extent to which differences found which a measuring instrument reflect true differences among those being tested. There are three different criteria for measuring validity. The first one is content validity, second one criteria related validity and third one is construct validity. Second one is reliability. Reliability has to do with the accuracy and precision of a measurement procedure. If the quality of reliability is satisfied by an instrument, then while using it, we can be confident that the transient and situational factors are not interfering. There are two aspects of reliability, that is stability and equivalence. The stability aspect is concerned with the securing consistent results with repeated measurements of the same person and with the same instrument. The equivalence aspect considers how much error may get introduced by different investigators or different samples of items being studied. A good way to test for the equivalence of measurements by two investigators is to compare their observations of the same events. There are three methods to ensure reliability. They are retest method, multiple form and split half method. The third one is practicability. The practicability characteristic of a measuring instrument can be judged in terms of economy, convenience and interpretability. From the operational point of view, the measuring instrument ought to be practical. For example, it should be economical, convenient and interpretable. Now, let us discuss the techniques of developing measurement tools. The technique of developing measurement tools involves 4 stages. The first one is concept development. The researcher should understand the major concepts pertaining to the study. Second one, specification of concept dimensions. It is the second step in which the researcher has to specify the dimensions of the concept that he or she has developed in the first step. For example, one may think of several dimensions such as product reputation, customer treatment, corporate leadership, concern for individuals and sense of social responsibility and so forth when one is thinking about the image of a certain company. Once the dimensions of a concept has been specified, the researcher must develop indicators for measuring each concept element. The third one is selection of indicators. After the dimensions of the concept have been specified, the researcher must develop indicators for measuring each concept element. The fourth one is formation of index. The last step is of combining the various indicators into an index. Summary. In social science research, scaling techniques helps us to construct the best suitable scales to measure the problem of the study. These scales are used to measure the attitudes of the respondent to a given statement. The researcher will be able to draw inferences after drawing the attitudes of the respondents by placing them on the scale. Scales also helps in checking the validity and reliability of the study which is undertaken.